Hello, this is Alan W. Wright, creator of the Robin Hood website, www.boldoutlaw.com. It's late April 2020, and the Folger Shakespeare Library and the Royal Shakespeare Company have suggested that we take up Cole Porter's advice and brush up your Shakespeare, start quoting him now. Well, they didn't actually quote Cole Porter's, well, as far as I know. What they actually said was hashtag share your Shakespeare. And, well, because I am a Robin Hood scholar, what I am going to share is all the Shakespearean references to the Robin Hood legend. So, we're going to begin with one of Shakespeare's very first plays, as far as we know, which is The Two Gentlemen of Verona, and in Act 4, Scene 1. And at this point, Valentine is in love with the daughter of the Duke of Milan. He was planning to elope with the daughter, Sylvia, and what happened is Valentine's friend also became smitten with Sylvia and betrayed Valentine to the Duke. So Valentine is sent into exile, and he and his servant are in the forest, and they encounter a gang of outlaws. And rather than saying that they're exiled because Valentine was in love with the Duke's daughter, they spin a tale about how Valentine killed someone in a fair fight, and this tale of valor and physical prowess impresses the outlaws. And so the third outlaw of the band says, "By the bare scalp of Robin Hood's fat friar, this fellow were a king for our wild faction." And indeed, they elect Valentine to be the king of the outlaws, and when eventually he encounters the Duke and the Duke pardons him, he also asks for the pardon of all the outlaws. And the idea of a person going into the woods and being elected king of the outlaws is somewhat representative in the tale of Gamlin, a medieval romance that has a lot of connections to the Robin Hood legend, and including the Gamlin, which sounds like Gamblegold, the bold peddler that Robin Hood faces, and also young Gamwell, another name for Will Scarlet, a member of Robin's band. So there are connections in that. And yes, of course, a gang of outlaws would make a reference to Robin Hood, even if these are technically supposed to be Italian outlaws. Shakespeare's Italy and ancient Greece and France always seem quite a bit like Shakespeare's England. Um, so, but in terms of outlaws making a reference to Robin Hood, I mean, that's a bit like, say, the TV series The Sopranos, where the mafia tends to quote The Godfather and Goodfellas, that they actually have an interest in the fiction of the world in which they live in. And you can see that also in some modern writings. Jennifer Ash is producing a series called The Fallville Chronicles about the actual 14th century criminal gang, the Fallvilles, and in that, the Fallville family often quotes from the Robin Hood ballads. And speaking about sort of criminal gangs, we go on to one of the next Shakespeare references to Robin Hood, which is in Henry IV, Part 1. And this play looks at the Henry IV's son, the future Henry V, Prince Harry, or as he's known by his sort of mentor figure, Hal. And Hal is mentored by Sir John Falstaff, who, you know, besides getting drunk in taverns and cheating and practicing a little highway robbery, for example, he is living this desolate lifestyle and tends to badmouth his prince and lie and cheat when he's at the Boar's Head Tavern, and he's kicking up a fuss that a ring of his was stolen, and he's kind of upping the value of the ring. And Mistress quickly, who's the hostess of the tavern, knows that that this was merely a copper ring, according to what the prince had told her. And when the prince comes in, she tells him the kind of lies that Falstaff's been spinning, and he asks if that's true, and she says, it is by her faithfulness and her truthfulness and her womanhood, to which Falstaff goes, "There's no more faith in thee than a stewed prune, nor no more truth in thee than a drawn fox. And as for womanhood, Maid Marian may be the deputy's wife of the ward to thee. Go, you thing, go." Now, just to say, the stewed prune is apparently a Elizabethan term for a prostitute. So, no more faith in Mistress Quickly than in a prostitute. A drawn fox is a captured fox, which is very wily and deceptive, and therefore not particularly truthful. And as for the womanhood and Maid Marian reference, now, in more modern times, you might think of Maid Marian as a warrior woman, but likely you still have a sort of Olivia de Havilland image of her, or perhaps the vixen from the 1973 cartoon of the very chaste and pure Maid Marian. And that's not how they would have thought of her in Shakespeare's day. Maid Marian isn't in the early Robin Hood ballads. She seems to come from a play tradition of the village festivals of the Robin Hood Games, or the May Games as they're called. Her and Friar Tuck seem to come in from that tradition, and she might be a character, though she's not named, in a play that's recorded in 1560 called Robin Hood and the Friar, and there they bring in a woman at the end to dance with the friar. So a disreputable woman, again, is how Maid Marian would be perceived then. And also played by, as was in the legitimate stage of Shakespeare's day as well, played by a man. So he's saying that for womanhood, a deputy of the wards is a pretty powerful position, or at least a respectable position. The wife of such would be a respectable woman. So he's saying that this disreputable figure of the theater that's played by a man is more of a woman than Mistress Quickly is. So that's it there. And there is now I noticed, by the way, that this Maid Marian reference is cut out of a couple of the modern versions of Henry IV Part 1. I noticed it was cut out of both the RSC's production of a few years ago, and also the 2010 production by Shakespeare's Globe. And I suspect that's just because it would probably confuse modern audiences. Actually, I guess the Globe makes up for it because they include the song Hallantoe in their production, which includes a reference to Robin Hood and Little John. So there is added Robin Hood content for what they took out. And there's another reference in the second of the Henry IV plays, Henry IV Part 2, Act 5, Scene 3. And Falstaff is with two county justices, Justice Shallow and Justice Silence. Shallow is talkative and says pretty stupid things, really. He's very shallow. And Justice Silence is relatively silent, except in this later scene he's drunk and wakes up to quote various lines of song. And so here he makes reference to a Robin Hood ballad when he wakes up and goes, "And Robin Hood, Scarlet and John," which is a refrain that comes in a few Robin Hood ballads in different forms. Most notably, the Jolly Pinder of Wakefield, which is yet another story of where Robin meets a stranger and he gets into a fight and he recruits him into his band. And this ballad was actually a play in Shakespeare's time. Possibly, it's anonymous as far as we know, but some ascribe it to Robert Greene, a contemporary of William Shakespeare's, who famously had some insulting things to say about Shakespeare and his plagiary, really. And going on with Falstaff again, Shakespeare's creation of this character, originally named Sir John Oldcastle, and then renamed Falstaff when Oldcastle's family were not particularly happy with the fictional depiction of this character. Anyway, he spun him off into a comedy called The Merry Wives of Windsor, and when Falstaff comes in Act 1, Scene 1, with his retinue, they're accused of various offenses, including them leading a character into drunkenness, and Falstaff asks his band, "What say you, Scarlett and John?" Which is a reference again to Will Scarlett and Little John. And it said that the band member he's interrogating, Bardolph, is drunken, so has a red nose, so the reference to Will Scarlett is particularly appropriate. And there's another Robin Hood reference in The Merry Wives of Windsor, though it would not have been so in Shakespeare's day. And that is in Act 4, Scene 4. The wives are plotting about how to embarrass Falstaff and how to lure him into something. So Mistress Page suggests, "There's an old tale that goes, Herne the Hunter, sometime a keeper here in Windsor Forest, does, all the winter time, at still midnight, walk round about an oak with great ragged horns, and there he blasts the tree, and takes the cattle, and makes milchkin yield blood, and shakes a chain, in a most hideous and dreadful manner. You have heard of such a spirit, and well you know the superstition of idle-headed eld received and did deliver to our age this tale of Herne the Hunter for a truth." And what they propose is that Falstaff come to Herne's Oak, dressed as Herne the Hunter himself, and then they would have children and such come out dressed as the fairies and get revenge on Falstaff for dressing as one of their kin and embarrass him. And so that's what happens. And the way this ties into the Robin Hood legend is that the 1980s TV series, so nearly 390 years after Shakespeare makes this reference to Herne the Hunter, they bring in Herne the Hunter as a shaman. In a sense, a man who dresses in the stag head, much as Falstaff dresses as Herne the Hunter in The Merry Wives of Windsor, though in this case he is possessed by a forest god. His reference in the first episode of Robin of Sherwood is, "When the hoarded one possesses me, I am called Herne the Hunter." And he is Lord of the Trees and such. And he appoints Robin Hood to be his son, to be the keeper of the powers of light and darkness. So Shakespeare's Herne the Hunter, which is this ghost that stalks Windsor Park, becomes aligned with the sort of Celtic god of Ceranos, and also, as critics of the time would say, a sort of Obi-Wan Kenobi figure to Robin Hood. And then finally, we come to what many might call Shakespeare's Robin Hood play without Robin Hood. And that's As You Like It, which was adapted from Thomas Lodge's work, Rosalind, which itself was adapted from the Tale of Gamblin, which I mentioned back when I talked about the Two Gentlemen of Verona. And Gamblin is younger of three. He is one of three brothers, and he's cheated out of his fortune by his corrupt older brother. And so too, you have Orlando, who is betrayed by his brother Oliver. You also have two brotherly dukes, Duke Senior and Duke Frederick. And Frederick usurps Duke Senior's place, and Duke Senior goes into exile. And this scene, Act 1, Scene 1, Oliver, the usurping brother of Orlando, is talking to Charles, who is a wrestler for the usurping Duke, Frederick. And he asks him about what's happened to Duke Senior. Where will he live? And the wrestler Charles responds, "They say he is already in the forest of Arden, and of many merry men with him, and there they live like the old Robin Hood of England. They say many young gentlemen flock to him every day, and fleet the time carelessly as they did in the Golden World. Now, again, apparently, As You Like It's supposed to take place in France. Not that you would know it, as I said, from any of the foreign settings of Shakespeare. No matter where they're supposed to be set, they all seem like they take place in England. And they make a Robin Hood reference here. And a pastoral one, because they say it is like the golden world, the golden age, something of the past, something idyllic, in a sense, and not quite as disreputable as some of the earlier Robin Hood references in Shakespeare. And at this time, in a way, Robin Hood was kind of upmarket, because one of Shakespeare's contemporaries, Anthony Munday, wrote a play, The Downfall of Robert Earl of Huntingdon, that worked on the few traditions from the 1500s to make Robin Hood the Earl of Huntingdon, an aspect that has stuck around to the modern day. Anyway, the reason that we're asked to share Shakespeare is because tomorrow, as I'm recording this, is April 23rd, which tradition has, though it is only a speculative date, is both the anniversary of Shakespeare's birth, so his birthday, and the anniversary of Shakespeare's death. So I'd just like to say happy birthday, William Shakespeare. Happy sad death day. And, you know, why, when it came to the Robin Hood legend, did you just reference it? Why did you, when it came to writing plays, why did you go, I know thee not, old man, to Robin Hood, and not write one yourself? Because I suspect it would have been a lot better than Anthony Munday's Downfall of Robert of Huntingdon. Anyway, that's the Robin Hood references in the works of Shakespeare. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, I run a website, which is www.boldoutlaw.com, and I'm not sure what I'll be doing for my next video. Please leave some suggestions what you'd like to hear me talk about next. You can go back and see previous videos about the works of Howard Pyle, some recommended Robin Hood books. And if you don't know, I'll be hosting a watch party on Twitter on May 2nd, 2020, if you're seeing this late, for the Disney 1973 Robin Hood cartoon, which featured the great Shakespearean actor Brian Bedford as the voice of Robin Hood. So I'll be tweeting along at hashtag Oodalali if you want to join in on that on May 2nd at 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, which is 7 p.m. British Summertime. So hope to see you then. Thanks very much.